Hello and welcome back to another episode of the D.A.R.E podcast. Today we have a fabulous lady and I'm delighted to have her on our platform, and her name is Baroness Sandy Verma. She has accomplished so much. She's a member of the House of Lords. She's a Chancellor of the University of Roehampton. She's the Chair of UN Women. She's a very successful businesswoman. And I cannot wait for you to learn more about her and her story and what she will dare you to do. And for those of you who don't know, I'm Miranda Brawn, and I'm the founder, the host and the producer of the D.A.R.E podcast. And this is partnered with City AM, which is a news publication in the City of London with nearly 12 million global users. So welcome to Baroness Sandy Verma.
Thank you very much, Miranda.
It's a pleasure to have you on our platform.
Well, it's great being here.
Fabulous.
It's the first time I've been here, actually.
Yeah. Isn't it wonderful?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
it's such a great spot, and it's so easy to get to. Once you know where to go.
Once you know where to go.
Yes.
Now I know the blue building.
Yes, the blue building. So you've done so much, and what I would like to do is start at the very beginning. I always like to start all these conversations at the very beginning. Now, your story is that you were born in India. You came here as a child to the UK. What were you like as a child?
So when I came here, I was just under one.
Wow.
So really, most of my formative years have been here in the UK. As a child, I was a reader. I loved reading, and I think when you're growing up in a country at that time, it was very different to what it is now. But it was an interesting time too. So as a child, the things that you're not allowed to say now were openly said then. You know, whether it was racist remarks, domestic abuse was normal. People accepted it happened. And that's why it was called a domestic. Police didn't get involved. But it also taught me how to be resilient. I had to learn very quickly in life how to be resilient.
And how did you learn that resilience skill? Because that's the R in the D.A.R.E. How did you learn to be resilient?
So I think first and foremost, you know, when you're a small kid of colour, where there's not many kids of colour, you didn't know whether you went into school having friends that day because they chose to be your friend or not to be your friend. So whether it was going to be a day of happiness or a day of loneliness. And, you know, we talk a lot about loneliness today, but in those days there was no sort of outlet for that. You know, you had to deal with it. And so whether it was as a 6-7-year-old in junior school or going on into secondary school, you had to make your own way. And so I felt that, you know, I saw what was going around me. By the time I got to secondary school, to be quite frank, you know, I'd figured out what I needed to do and how to do it. Academically, I was bright. Most kids from the Asian backgrounds were told that they had to have a good education.
Yes.
Either come first or second, third was not good enough. That's how my father's mantra was. You don't come third.
Yeah.
And so you had to strive to be good at academics. But at the same time, you also had to strive to be good at survival. And I grew up at a time when I witnessed the Ugandan Asians coming into the UK as an 11-year-old, and I actually saw racism at its worst, but also community spirit at its best. So those two things may be contradiction of terms, but they do go hand in hand.
And it's funny because we had lunch recently, and it was a nice intimate lunch, and we had really honest conversations. And one of the things I shared with you was the fact that back in the 60s and 70s, you had the Caribbeans and you had the Asians who had that strong sense of community.
I think it is. I think there's various types of racism as well. You know, and the thing for us is to be able to say that there's no place for any form of discrimination, whether it's on gender or race or anything.
Yeah.
But we have to make spaces for different voices.
Yeah.
Now, you're right. It was very overt in the 60s. I mean, definitely in the 60s and 70s. And then we got to a place where, you know, we started to break through and the Race Relations Act came in and, you know, there was a few more protections there. But then you also saw communities sort of becoming very much inward looking to themselves. So you're right when you say that, you know, the West Indian community actually were great allies of the Asian community, as were many people from the white community. But now, the numbers, as they've grown, they've become more and more interested in their own communities. That's not the way to get rid of bigotry and discrimination. You have to work together. And I remember going into my secondary school, which was predominantly in a very, very poor, it was one of the worst, it was known as one of the worst council areas of Leicester. And just imagine, you're in the middle of the most racist city and a very, very racist ward where the school is located. Two Asian kids in a whole school, basically. And in the first 2 or 3 days, it was a West Indian girl in the senior form that came across to me. And she said, anybody gives you any trouble, seek me out, find me.
That's a perfect example of how the West Indians help support the Asian community.
But that is, I think, what we've lost today.
Yes.
She didn't have to. She was quite happy that she did. Because I think, and that gave me incredible courage to know somebody was watching my back.
I think now the Asian community within the UK, they're in a relatively stronger position than they were in the 60s and 70s, whereas the black community are not in as strong a position, I personally feel. And maybe what the Asian community needs to do now is be an ally to the black community more and actually speak up more for the black community. What do you think about that?
I don't think we need to speak up for each other. I think we just need to support each other.
Yeah.
And for me, I just don't have those shutters. And I always say that, you're always much stronger if you're together.
Yes.
I don't think we need to speak. I think we need to raise the ambitions of people up better. The education was a driver for a lot of people in the Asian community or going into business. You either went into business or you did academics. But I think what we need to do is to make sure that the ambitions of those of our brothers and sisters in other communities, be it the black community, be it the poor working white class.
Yes.
Both of those communities need uplifting. We've all come through the journey. All of us have come through the journey. And all of us know what the scars are. So we have to, therefore, make use of our knowledge and our experiences, but not just keep them for our own inner communities, because the wider community is our community.
And it's funny, because I think that's a very good point. Now, I'm Asian, black and white, so I can understand from all different aspects. But I think when you have an Asian person join an organisation, for example, within a year, there's a lot more Asians that potentially might join that organisation. I think if there is an opening to have an Asian person actually reach out to a person from the black community and say, look, here's an opening, come on board. I think the black community needs to do more of that. Whenever I talk to black people, they always say black people don't help each other enough. So I think there's also that also needs to be discussed. But we could talk about this particular point all day, but there's so much more that we've got to get through. Your grandfather was a freedom fighter. He was a leader of India's Workers' Association and the Indian League. You were married at 17, which I guess... So when were you married? This was in the 60s, 70s?
70s.
Everyone got married very young. My parents in the 70s got married at 18, 19. So I think that was the thing. Back in those days, everyone did get married very young. But do you think you got that fighter spirit from your grandfather? It's in the blood because of what he did?
No, I think, first of all, my grandfather came pre-World War II.
Yeah.
He was very much a businessman from background.
Yeah.
And he saw the sort of injustices felt by people from the Asian community for work. And so the Indian Workers' Association was set up actually to give voice to those workers. We can forget easily the sort of barriers that they faced. We can all forget that. We can all forget the challenges that those people face because we don't face them directly today. But at the same time, they were the shoulders that we all built ourselves on. So we mustn't forget that piece. Whether it's people who came on the Windrush, all of those people. And the challenges that we have no idea their experiences. So I think for me, it wasn't about learning the politics of it. It was about learning how to stand up and be a voice for others. And I think that's the bit that I've always had instilled in my mind, and I've seen racism at its worst, but I've also seen community spirit at its best. I grew up with a Scottish neighbour on one side and an Irish neighbour on the other side, and Liverpudlians opposite. And we all had a very, very, very committed community spirit in those days. And, I was one of 5 siblings, and our neighbour, we were all, they didn't think twice about clipping us around the head if we did something wrong.
Yeah.
But my mother would have expected that because they cared. So I think our sort of priorities and what we expect of people is different now. But, I got married. Actually, I was in the middle of my A-levels when I got pulled out to get married to my husband, who I've been happily married to for the last 46 years.
I've met him a few times. He's lovely.
He's great. But, again, it was normal. It wasn't something that you felt that was, an abnormal thing to do. Only 7% of the whole population of UK went to university. And that predominantly from, very reasonably well-off middle-class families. So again, there was nothing really there to rebel against.
Yeah. Now, you started in the family business, which was high fashion. And then you moved across investing in supplying for residential care. How did that happen for making the transition? Because one of the things, I've had a very multi-sector career, lots of different roles, lots of different backgrounds, and continue to grow and do that. And you have done the same. And when I look at lots of successful people with successful mindsets, there's that common trait where they don't just stick and do one thing. There are many successful people who have stuck and done one thing. Look at Bill Gates. He focused on technology, and that's what he focused on. But how did you make the transition from the high fashion to the residential? And then we'll get on to what you're doing now, because you're doing some amazing work now.
So because I wanted to go on to university, and because I wanted to be a doctor, actually, my whole ambition in life was to be a doctor.
I think that's the Asian thing, doctor, lawyer, accountant,
lawyer,
maybe engineer.
Engineer, but I really desperately wanted to be a doctor.
And what happened?
Well, as I said,
you got married, 17.
I got married,
yeah.
and it was part and parcel of the course. That's how these things happen, and so I wouldn't be doing this probably what I'm doing now had those things played out. So I never live with regret. I live with the fact that whatever opportunity comes along must be for the better. So I have my optimistic head constantly wired in. But at the end of the day, the business started because my grandfather was the first Asian person in Leicester to set up a factory, 1952. Then my father did one in 1967. And I just thought, hang on a minute, this is one way to show that you can actually be a woman and do it and be successful, if not more successful. And so if you're a young person, the one thing you know about is fashion. So I knew what young people wanted, and I was good at embracing new ideas and putting them onto paper and delivering them outwards. So I went into manufacturing, I went into wholesaling with my husband, and we did it very well. But we also learned a lot about our own strengths, but also our weaknesses. We learned a lot about ourselves, and we learned a lot about people. And I think if on the journey you can do those things as well, it really does hold you in really good stead for whatever else is coming around the corner.
Definitely. I think starting a business or growing a business, it's no easy thing to do. So if you can accomplish that, the transferable skills into the residential care. So how did you move in?
So it's not resident, it's actually social care.
Okay, so Wikipedia's wrong.
Yeah, so Wikipedia's wrong. And I don't know, I've never read my Wikipedia page. So I
read it this morning.
So I don't go onto Wikipedia. But social care came to me. I was watching a TV program and I was just appalled. I was really, really appalled at how we treat elderly people in this country. And I just thought, this can't be right. We need to be able to offer something that is actually person-centric. So I took about a year and a half learning about social care. And I'm still the biggest advocate for better social care. And I get really irritated when people say it's an unskilled job. Those people that deliver social care must be amongst the most skilled people I know. And the heavy burden of responsibility on them is enormous. And I understand the NHS is very important, but social care is actually the biggest preventative arm for the huge costs that are put onto the NHS. And somebody somewhere has got to get that right.
Well, let's see next month with the UK elections. I mean, talking about the UK elections, it's clearly a busy time for everyone, especially with you. You've now got a political career. How did you move into, so you've done the social care. How did you move from that to the House of Lords? What was the journey like? Because now you're a Baroness Verma of Leicester for the House of Lords. I mean, that must be such an amazing feeling to actually be able to walk into the House of Lords, know you've got an office there, and you're making change in the UK.
So do you know the funny thing was when, and I'm sure lots of young people do it, they do that trip during their school time to the House of Commons and the House of Lords, right?
Well, my school didn't take me there, but I would have loved them to.
Well, I remember walking past knowing that I wanted to be in the building.
Yeah.
And I fought racism for as long as I can remember in my life.
Yeah.
But I wanted to be a member of Parliament only when I realised being invited by businesses for the European elections when we were in Europe to come and meet the candidates. And I was just so disappointed at their lack of knowledge on inner cities like Leicester. And I think that sort of made me irritated when I couldn't get answers to the questions. And I was contacted by my party to come and say, come and tell us what it is that we need to do more of. And I think the journey started there in the sort of national politics. I've always been an activist for as long as I can remember, whether it's standing up for women in domestic abuse cases or just trying to get regeneration into places like Leicester. Because, people often feel that they're left out. They're not included in the discussion. They're not part of the debate. Nobody asks them, but they get things done to them. And to me, that's not the way politics should work. We're all public servants when you come into politics. And the conversation should be both ways. And I think the art of politics has sort of left us a little bit.
Definitely. And you're also doing great stuff in Africa. And I know we saw each other because we only met about 18 months ago, and we just kept bumping into each other at various events. And at the House of Lords, I was given an award. I was really humbled. One of the top 50 Afro-Caribbean leaders who are making a positive difference within the community and helping to make positive change. And you very kindly hosted the event at the House of Lords. But it was wonderful because that event was it was in relation to an African business-focused magazine publication. And one of the key things that I got from that event was the fact that there were so many African leaders, African business leaders who were in the room and just showcasing all the wonderful work that Africa's doing. And I know you have a very strong link to Africa. You're doing, from a business perspective as well. Clearly your son's in Africa as well, so you've got that family connection. But it would be wonderful to use this platform to just highlight all the wonderful work, because I think when people think of Africa, they maybe think of Band-Aid and Bob Geldof and, all that sort of stuff. But there's so much opportunity from a business perspective in Africa. It's booming from an industry perspective. There's so much resources there. What is the sort of stuff that you're doing, and what would you recommend to businesses? Because City AM, it's a business platform. What would you recommend to organisations and companies within the UK who aren't focused on Africa? What message would you send to them, and what are you doing at the moment in Africa?
So, first of all, my son is in renewable energy there.
Yeah.
And he saw the opportunity. We have no links with Africa at all. But he had a conversation with people when they'd come to the UK. He saw it as a great opportunity and took the decision to go. And actually has spent most of his time there for the last 8 years, because he just loves it. He sees the opportunities. He sees there are really, really good people desperately wanting to do well for their countries. And so if you were to ask me what are the opportunities, opportunities are in abundance. We need to have a conversation that actually is about how do we do more trade. You know, we in the West have had such a big focus on aid. Now, I have an issue around about how aid is distributed. I have an issue about how aid is talked about and the programs around aid. And so for me, if I was to say all of that money through OECD rules, for ODA rules, look at how you actually do the multiplier effect and do it through trade. Because countries need to grow economically. Then they don't need aid. They need their young people, which they have huge human capital there. And these young people don't want to leave. They want to build their countries up, but they need to have the opportunities to do the build-up. So for our company, 98% are local people. And we work hard with them, but they are the best of the best. And I can tell you, there are some incredibly talented people there, but the infrastructures may need improving. We need to look at that. We need to look at how we can actually get better collaborative partnerships, because there are great universities there. Why aren't we working better with the universities? And why aren't we working better with governments in creating those jobs? So I think there's many, many multiple conversations to be had.
So what advice would you give to maybe women, the whole next generation, anyone actually, who might be interested in following your footsteps, maybe taking a step in a political career or being an activist and speaking up for things like gender diversity or whatever might rock their boat? What advice would you give to someone?
So I would always say, be yourself. Be your authentic you. Don't try and mimic somebody else. Don't try and be somebody else. Just be you. Then find allies. You need allyship, whether they are mentors, whether they are sponsors, whether they're just people who will occasionally dip in your life and dip out. But you need to have those people around you, because the one thing you find is that when you're on a journey, you're going to come through lots of ups and lots of downs. You'll question yourself on why the hell am I doing this sometimes? But there needs to be those people around you that you can pick the phone up to and just say, you know what, just carry on, you're doing a great job. Those days will pass because the better days are always around you. We tend to focus on the downs, but most of the times we're in the ups. So when we go through a little bit of a down period, that's the time when you find yourselves talking to your mentors or your allies or your sponsors. And ultimately, dip back and look at those people who have actually made it. None of their journeys would have been easy, regardless of what background they come from. All of them would have had to deal with some sort of crisis at some point. And people say, why do you keep doing what you're doing? And I say, well, until we stop having the discussion about why these things aren't in place in natural justice ways, I'll keep doing it. And people like me will keep doing it, because we haven't made enough space for people like you and I. We haven't made enough space for people generally that are from different backgrounds. We're still very much, the decision makers are still very much very similar to each other. So to break that, not for the negative way of breaking it, but for just making more space for different voices to come in, we have to keep going.
I totally agree with everything you said there. And that's what the E stands for in D.A.R.E. It's about keeping that enthusiasm and that positive energy, that positive outlook, because it's all about manifesting what you want to happen. When it comes to having a successful mindset, this is a successful mindset podcast. Do you do affirmations? Have you ever done vision boards? What sort of things do you do when it comes to a goal and you want to achieve it? What sort of things have you done in order to make that goal happen?
So you see, I'm very clear where I need to be.
Yeah.
I have a very clear direction line. And I know people do all sorts of different things. But if I have an understanding of where I need to go and the steps I need to take and the people that I need to take with me, that to me is how I achieve my goals. I always reverse engineer to say, okay, I need to get there, now how am I going to do it? And then I work backwards to see how I'm going to do it. Yeah. It's, ultimately, if all journeys were easy, everybody would do it. And if all journeys were so simple, everybody could do it. These thousands of books that tell you how to do things, they're good as tools, but they're not you. You need to be you. And that's why, your 4 letters are so relevant in any context. Yeah. You take them in any context, whether you're a kid at school to whether you want to be on that trajectory up in your business. Those 4 letters, if you put them to yourselves, matter.
100%. That I couldn't have said it any better myself. And it's the D.A.R.E, dreaming, setting the goals. The A is about the action, though. It's all about the action. So this year, the Miranda Brawn Diversity Leadership Foundation, we made UK history in October 2016, launching the first diversity lecture event of its kind. This year's lecture event is at the University of Roehampton, where you are a Chancellor. I'm their first honorary doctorate, their first honorary professor in business and law. And this year, the theme at the annual lecture is all about global gender human rights. And I think this is really important. You're also the chair of UN Women UK. And, you've got a background when it comes to fighting against domestic violence. And you've been such a great spokeswoman for women and girls across the UK and beyond. What are some of the things that you would say to someone who's thinking about maybe getting into that? How could they get involved to help?
There are so many brilliant organisations. And, to be an advocate for somebody else is a really good way of just getting into the work, just by joining one of those networks. And I say, to women who think, but it's not for me, does my voice matter? Every voice matters. We're advocating for people who have no voice at all, for the millions of women across the world, many sitting in this country. I mean, you'll know that now the football's on, the stats for domestic abuse are going to go up.
Yeah.
And these are things sitting in a very civilized country. So just imagine where those rules don't apply at all, where you don't have the right to be able to fight for your children if you're in a difficult marriage. Those things need to be dealt with all of the time. And the only way we're going to do it is if we've got strong advocacy voices. And the way we actually look at how girls and boys are in society starts very young. We start to design how children think very early in life, just by what we give them as toys, how we behave towards them. So I think part of it is about, am I a good advocate in my own way of how I behave in my household? Start from there.
100%. And it's funny because when I give a talk at schools from 4 years old upwards, and you might ask a very simple question, did a TED talk on it about 5 years ago. How many of you, talking to boys and girls, age 4 to 11, how many of you think the role of a judge is a man's job? All hands up. A woman, 1 or 2 hands. So I think it's really educating our next generation. But I think having male allies as well is really key.
So important.
If you've got a friend and you know that they are physically violent towards their partner, their wife, their girlfriend, whoever that is, don't keep quiet about it. Speak up. I think that's really important from a male ally perspective. Being a male ally is not just going to an event or speaking up quietly, but it's also checking your male friend if you know that they're doing something that they shouldn't be doing. The
conversation has to, we need to be comfortable talking about everything and anything.
Yeah, but sometimes these conversations are uncomfortable.
They are uncomfortable.
And it's something we've got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Yeah. It's just one of those things. So I also did a research, and I'm completing that. It's on the Brawn Review. I started this at Oxford University when I was a senior visiting fellow, and it's called, it's all focused on sustainability, inclusion and corporate governance. What do you think the boardroom, we're operating in the boardroom at very senior levels, and I know lots of our audience are operating, lots of our guests are from the boardroom as well. What do you think the boardroom should be doing in order to be more inclusive and more sustainable?
Well, there are two things that I always think. First of all, it's driven from the top.
Yeah.
If you get leadership to understand what diversity of voice means, and it doesn't mean that it's a threat to you. So to get that understanding into the discussion is really key. The second thing I think is really key is how do we encourage all leadership teams to ensure that they're doing shadowing teams so people have an understanding of what's expected. How do you have an expectation of when you get to the board of your role? And I think there are so many myths around the journey to boardrooms that we need to quash, because you will still find too many women doubting themselves to actually put themselves forward. And I think we really do need to move away from, this is what an ideal boardroom looks like, because it doesn't actually reflect anything of any organisation of what an ideal, because we don't know what the organisation is like. So we have to sort of have a rethink about what we want to see in a boardroom, but it's driven by leadership, it's driven by the ability to listen. See, listening, I think, is a big art that most of us have forgotten. We like to tell people, but we don't like to be told. And I think challenge in a boardroom is critical. And where there's no challenge, those boardrooms fail, sadly. And where people don't change, those organisations fail. And you've seen it. COVID taught us a big lesson about the high street. No quick pivot, no agility, no change of thought. High streets are today empty. So I think it's around about constantly updating your own self.
Yeah, I think that's key. And I think as organisations and businesses, we're constantly evolving, whether it's with technology, and when we're looking at the boardroom, it's not just the diversity of the actual individual, whether it's age, gender, race, disability, but also personality, ideas, the background. And one of the things I'm pleased to see, my boardroom career has been within the automotive industry, electrical vehicles. I'm on the board of Guy's and St Thomas NHS Foundation Trust, the medical sector. Within law firms, within finance industries. I think it's really important that the boardroom opens up to people from different sectors as well, because that's another way that you can grow and learn and become more sustainable. Now, we are coming to the end of our conversation.
Can I just, before we just come to the end,
Yes,
Miranda,
of course.
the one thing I would say about boardrooms is that if you do not have the talent yourself to take challenge, you'll be in trouble.
Definitely.
Your organisation will be in trouble. And it's not about this sort of discussion that's going on around now with, numbers and quotas. It's not about that. It's actually about being reflective of the world. Because you said it, technology is connecting us much better now than ever before. And if you can't make those connections and they're not reflected in your discussions...
100%. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I'm a big fan when it comes to mentoring, coaching, sponsorship. And one of my very early mentors from JP Morgan, when I used to work there in my 20s, he said to me, communication skills is the greatest skill that you can have in order to be an effective leader, but being able to listen. Listening skills is the key.
Yeah.
And that means listening to your workforce, listening to your clients and bringing that knowledge into the boardroom. Now, you've truly accomplished everything. You're a fantastic success story. Are there any other goals that you would like to achieve at your very young age?
Oh, well, look, I'm going to hit my wonderful 65th birthday this year. So,
And you don't look it.
Well, that's very kind of you. My bones tell me I am. But I think there are just so many things that I've still got undone, that I've not done, that I need to do. So I will just keep going and doing. Writing my book for my birthday present to myself this year is my book.
So you're writing a book?
Well, it's going to be a pocket book. It's called A Conversation to Myself If I Was 30.
Oh, I love that.
So it's really the question you asked earlier, what would I give as advice?
Yes.
I think 30 is a good age when people really know the direction of travel they're going into. And so that's my little pocketbook that I'm trying to get, when time allows, I do my little jots down. And then, to be quite frank, just be as disruptive as I've been for the last 65 years. Just continue being a disruptor.
Sounds amazing. I'm also finishing a book, so let's watch this space. Now, the final question is, this podcast is all about DARE. D.A.R.E, daring to dream bigger, having the determination to achieve your goals. The A is all about the action, and the R is the resilience, and also setting that realistic self-assessment, and the E is the energy. What do you dare our audience to do?
I dare them to actually look at what their dream is and do it. Just do it.
I love that.
Don't limit yourself because nobody's told you to do it. Just do it. I would never have achieved half of what I've done if I hadn't had I can't use that word, if I hadn't had the gall to do it.
Yes. That sounds amazing. Baroness Sandy Verma of Leicester. To me, Sandy, thank you so much for being a guest on the D.A.R.E podcast with City AM. You've been an amazing guest. Thank you for your time and just sharing some jewels of wisdom for our audience. And thank you very much to our audience for listening to the D.A.R.E podcast with City AM. I'm Miranda Brawn, the host and producer. And please do make sure that you subscribe, you follow all of our various platforms, including YouTube. Thank you very much for listening and watching, and see you again soon. Thank you.